I never thought I'd be the type to share personal stuff online, but here I am needing to get something off my chest. Maybe some of you can relate or offer some advice. I'm a 26-year-old woman and my husband Eric is 27. We've been married for 5 years now, and everything seemed great between us. At least that's what I thought. When we first met in college, we just clicked. He was always steady, supportive, and romantic, and I was the one pushing boundaries. He would always encourage me to follow my passions, especially my advocacy for feminism and women's rights. Before we got married, we set up an agreement. I would take care of the home, and Eric would handle all the bills and work-related things. Honestly, I was fine with it. I didn't particularly love doing chores or cleaning, but it was better than working a job, and I could use that time to focus on my passions. Eric was understanding, and we seemed to function well with this dynamic. He was always romantic, spontaneous, and generous. I never doubted our bond. However, as time passed, I began to take him for granted. I would go out with my friends, living for the excitement of nightlife. I thrived on partying, dancing, and escaping the daily grind. While Eric preferred quiet evenings at home with a book or a movie, I resented that he didn't share my love for the club scene. In my mind, I saw him as boring, overly cautious, and out of touch with who I was. I convinced myself that what I did when I went out wasn't a big deal. It was just harmless fun, a way to let loose. But Eric, even though he never outright complained, started to show signs of being hurt by my behavior. When I would return home late, drunk and covered in glitter, I would see the disappointment in his eyes. He would try to express his feelings, but I dismissed him. I accused him of being controlling, of trying to hold me back from having fun. Whenever he voiced his concerns, I used my feminist beliefs as a shield, calling him misogynistic or anti-feminist. If he didn't agree with me, I weaponized my beliefs, turning them against him just so I could justify my actions without facing any real accountability. I was so consumed by my own desire to be independent and free that I failed to notice the growing distance between us. I couldn't see that I was losing the very trust and love that had once held us together. My selfishness was causing irreparable damage to our relationship, but I kept ignoring the warning signs. Then one night, everything came to a head. I had plans with my friends to go out to a club, but I had to cancel a date night with Eric to join them. Naturally, he was upset, especially because he'd been looking forward to spending time with me. But I shut him down, accusing him of being misogynistic for not supporting me spending time with my friends. He didn't want to argue, so he reluctantly let it go. Then, as I was getting ready to leave, I put on a revealing red dress. Eric was concerned and asked me to change, saying it was too provocative. He thought it wasn't appropriate for a married woman to wear something like that. At that moment, I felt like he was trying to control me again. I didn't see his concern as genuine, but rather as another attempt to undermine my independence. I refused to listen to him, arguing that the dress wasn't revealing and that his request was unreasonable. I accused him of being controlling and stuck in outdated views. I was furious, and the argument escalated quickly. I stood my ground, determined not to let him dictate my choices. My friends arrived to pick me up, and without saying another word to Eric, I stormed out of the house, leaving him standing there, defeated and worried. As we drove away, I felt a mix of triumph and anger. I had won the argument, or so I thought. I convinced myself that I was in the right. But deep down, I knew something wasn't quite right. When I returned home later that night, Eric wasn't there. I called and texted him, but he didn't respond. I went to bed hoping he would be back soon and that we could talk things through. The next morning, Eric came home, but he was quiet and distant. It was so unusual for him. He wasn't angry or upset like I thought he might be, but there was definitely something off. He went about doing chores in the house, but his demeanor was cold and detached. I could tell something was wrong, but he wasn't saying anything. Then out of the blue, he told me that we would be renewing our lease. I was confused and shocked. It was such a strange thing to say without any context, and I couldn't understand why he would bring it up now. I've spent the past few days reflecting on everything. The truth is, I've been so caught up in my own world and my desires that I haven't even realized how much I've hurt Eric. The way I used feminism to silence him, how I dismissed his concerns, and how I ignored the cracks in our relationship. It's all becoming clear now. I've failed him and I don't know how to fix things. We had been planning to go house hunting since our lease was ending at the end of the year. We had already discussed not renewing it. So when Eric suddenly suggested extending the lease, I was taken aback. I demanded an explanation, but he just told me that something had come up and we would need to postpone our plans to buy a house. He remained vague, offering no further details. Despite my attempts to get him to open up, I tried to press him for more answers. But no matter how much I pushed, he remained tight-lipped. Frustrated and confused, I eventually gave up, hoping that he would explain things later. Then Eric dropped another bombshell. He told me I would need to get a job. I was shocked, demanding to know why. He calmly explained that if I wanted to embrace feminism and be independent, then I should contribute to the household financially. He accused me of abusing feminism and said my behavior the previous night was disrespectful and out of line. From now on, he said we would be splitting everything, bills and household chores, 50-50ths. He made it clear that he would no longer be carrying the burden of all the responsibilities by himself, and he wasn't going to tolerate being taken for granted any longer. I was taken aback by his sudden assertiveness. This was not the Eric I knew. He had always been supportive, accommodating, and willing to shoulder everything in our relationship. But now he was standing firm, and I could see that he was serious. His words stunned deeply. It was as though I had forced him into this position, and now I was being held accountable for it. I felt a mix of guilt, anger, and confusion, unsure of how to respond. I had always prided myself on being strong and independent. But now I was being confronted with my own hypocrisy. Eric's ultimatum forced me to reckon with my own behavior, and I didn't know how to process it. I sat there trying to make sense of everything, while Eric continued with his chores, his expression unreadable. In the midst of all this, I resented Eric. I saw him as trying to control me, to clip my wings. I didn't view his actions as a wake-up call or the chance to improve our relationship. Instead, I felt punished for being myself and for embracing feminism. Begrudgingly, I started looking for a job, though it felt like a betrayal of who I was. Through one of Eric's connections, I found a job at a restaurant, but I hated it. I felt superior to the staff, thinking they were beneath me. I was rude, dismissive, and ungrateful. And I know now that I was wrong. But at the time, I blame Eric for everything. I was convinced that he was punishing me for being a feminist and not conforming to his expectations. I couldn't see that. He was just trying to make our relationship more equal. As time went on, my resentment toward Eric grew. Every request he made felt like an attempt to control me. When he asked me to help with chores, I saw as him trying to put me in my place. When he suggested saving money, I saw as him restricting my freedom. Our arguments grew more frequent and intense, and I lashed out at him, accusing him of being a misogynist and a hypocrite. Even when Eric tried to calmly explain his perspective, I shut him down. I didn't want to hear it. I was too wrapped up in my own anger and self-righteousness to listen to his side of things. I couldn't see the damage I was causing to our relationship, and I kept pushing him away. Looking back now, I realize how toxic my mindset was. I was so focused on being right and defending my feminist beliefs that I lost sight of what truly mattered, our love and partnership. But back then I couldn't see past my own ego. I continued to resent Eric, convinced that he was the one in the wrong. It wasn't until much later that I understood the true meaning of equality in a relationship. And by then it was too late to fix what we had. As time passed, I sought validation and attention elsewhere outside our home. I convinced myself that it was harmless fun. But deep down, I knew it was an act of rebellion against Eric. I was frustrated and hurt, and I used flirting and dancing as an outlet for those emotions. I never told Eric about it because I knew it would hurt him deeply, and I justified my actions by telling myself it was better for him not to know. The truth was I was too afraid to face the consequences of what I had done. I didn't want to confront how much I had let our relationship deteriorate. So I kept pretending everything was fine. But it wasn't fine. It all came crashing down when one of my friends went behind my back and told Eric about my flirting and dancing. I couldn't believe it. The betrayal stunned deeply, and it made me question everything from my friendships to my own actions. When Eric confronted me about it, I initially denied everything. I refused to take responsibility, blaming him for not meeting my needs. Even though deep down I knew I was the one at fault. Eric told me he wanted a divorce. He said that after learning about my behavior, he had been thinking about ending our relationship for a while, and this was just the final straw. When Eric kicked me out, I was left feeling lost and broken. It was a harsh wake-up call, and I had no choice but to face the consequences of my actions. Returning to my parents' house was a humbling experience. I could see the disappointment in their eyes as they let me back in. And it hurt. I had let everyone down. Eric, my parents, and myself, and I had no one to blame but myself. The shame and regret weighed heavily on me, and I didn't know where to begin picking up the pieces of my life. I didn't know why I was posting about my situation, but I guess I was hoping for some guidance during this confusing time. I felt lost and I wasn't sure what the next step would be. A lot of people criticized me and some comments were downright harsh. But there were also some helpful suggestions, and for that I was grateful. I continued searching for a job, but I hadn't had much luck. I was trying to stay positive, but it was tough. The divorce was progressing, and Eric remained firm in his decision to end things. He had made it clear that there was no going back. After the divorce was finalized, I didn't get much from it. There was no alimony or property division since we had no joint debt or children. The process was relatively simple. But I was still left feeling unsatisfied with the outcome. My parents were disappointed, but we all agreed that continuing to fight for more would only be a waste of money. Meanwhile, the job search was proving to be a major challenge. I struggled to find anything and was faced with the reality that my portfolio was weak and my skills needed work. This put more strain on my relationship with my parents, who had started hinting that I should contribute financially to the household. Looking back on everything, I see clearly now how my resentment and disrespect toward Eric poisoned our relationship. Every harsh word, every dismissive glance, and every argument only pushed us further apart. Instead of communicating openly and working through our issues, I allowed my pride and selfishness to guide my actions. I took Eric for granted, and I failed to recognize the person who had stood by my side for so long. I see now how wrong I was, and I wish I could go back and fix everything, but it's too late for that. If there's one thing I want people to learn from my experience, it's this. Don't let resentment and disrespect destroy your relationship. Communicate honestly. Cherish the person you love and never take them for granted. Once they're gone, all that's left is regret. Things seem bleak right now, but I'm trying to stay positive. I'm grateful for the support of my family, and I know I'll eventually get back on my feet. I'm determined to rebuild my life, but I'll never forget the lessons I've learned from my mistakes.